thing. Soldiers do it all the time. But what's the effect and the consequence of that killing?
Here to answer that is Jake Phillips with his topic, to kill.
Killing is often something that's avoided as much in civilized conversation as possible. This is understandable. It's brutal, it's bloody, and it's horrifying. However, despite our modern culture's hatred and horror at killing, we're also strangely fascinated by this. You see this fascination everywhere in the media and entertainment industry. In TVs, movies, and video games, killing has become the focus point of these mediums. One of the misconceptions that these mediums have given us as a society is that killing is easy psychologically, and that it can be done without a care in the world. Oftentimes you see someone like protagonists like James Bond or Jason Bourne kill hundreds of nameless enemy soldiers without a care in the world. This, however, is simply not true. From soldiers who have been in combat and have killed, they will often report that it is the most horrifying and worst thing that they've ever had to do in their lives, and that it haunts them to this day. The simple fact that these films fail to take into account is that within 98% of people, there exists an intense resistance to killing other humans, one that is extremely difficult to overcome. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, that makes perfect sense, I can never kill anyone. But you would also be wrong. In his book, On Killing, by Dave Grossman, a former Army Ranger, he discusses the various methods that allow soldiers to kill and reduce some of the psychological trauma that results from it. One of the most significant being what's called emotional distancing. This sums up to, if I can consider you as being less than human, being inferior, then it is therefore acceptable for me to kill you. And I can do so with much less psychological trauma. This us versus them mentality. This mentality was used throughout history. It was used by the Nazis in World War II. It was used by the Japanese at Nanking. And one of the ways that armies have done this in the past is by bestowing bigoted and racist names on their enemies. The reason armies have done this for centuries is not because armies are full of racist and bigoted men. That's ridiculous. But it is so that their soldiers consider the people they're fighting to be less than human. In their minds, they're no longer fighting Germans, Japanese, Vietnamese. They're fighting Jerrys, Japs, Gooks. They bestow these names to consider their enemies being lesser, being an inferior race, and therefore acceptable to kill. Another factor that drastically increases a soldier's ability to kill in combat is the type of training they're received. In his book, Men Against Fire, Brigadier General S.L.A. Marshall recorded that in World War II, only 15 to 20% of infantrymen ever fired their rifle. Compare that to statistics from, say, Vietnam, where 90% of infantrymen fired their rifle. The thing that changed was mainly the Army's training tactics and the way that rifle training was conducted. During World War II, rifle training was conducted on an open field, firing at a bullseye. You could see what you were shooting at, it was just a paper target. Fast forward 50 years to Vietnam, and now rifle training was conducted where you stood in a foxhole or a little dugout in the ground, and you fired at humanoid-shaped targets that popped up quickly. This trained the soldier to shoot what's called instinctively. They would aim and pull the trigger without even thinking about it. They may not make a conscious decision to pull the trigger and kill, but their bodies would do it instinctively. Naturally, this also greatly increased the soldier's ability to kill. Another factor was the obedience to authority that many infantrymen and soldiers felt. Oftentimes, people don't really understand how powerful authority can be on the battlefield. To give you an example, in 1964, Yale psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted what later became known as the Milgram experiment, where he took a handful of people, put them in a room with a researcher, and asked them to give painful electric shocks to another person that they could hear but not see. The victim would cry and plead for the person to stop giving the shocks, but the researcher would keep insisting and gradually increase the voltage until it was well past the lethal point. When this experiment was first presented to the psychological community, many thought that only a handful of people would comply with authority and deliver the lethal shock, maybe 5 or 10%. It was found that over 85% of people follow authority, and deliver the electric shock. Now, thankfully, this was all staged and nobody actually died. But this just goes to show how powerful authority can be on and off the battlefield. A fourth factor that seriously enables killing is physical distance. This basically sums up to, the farther away I am from you, the easier it is for me to kill you psychologically. This is why, throughout history, bomber and artillery crews have had significantly lower rates of PTSD and post-war depression than, say, infantry units. The people in the artillery crew cannot see the death and destruction they're causing. Sure, they hear the blast, they see the explosion, but they don't see the death and the havoc that they're wreaking. They don't see bodies being incinerated or buildings collapsing on top of families. Take that a step further to infantry and rifle range. Now, when I aim my rifle and I pull the trigger, I can see the human being that I've just killed, and I know that I'm responsible for the death of that person. And that creates a significantly stronger level of psychological trauma. Take it a step further to bayonet or knife range. Now the trauma is at its peak. Because not only can I see you, can I see that I'm killing a human, I can see that I'm killing a person. I can look at your face, I can look into your eyes, and I know that I'm responsible for your death. You specifically, not just another human. One of the interesting dilemmas presented to soldiers on the battlefield is whether to kill or not to kill. And this is mainly out of fear that they will let their comrades or their brother-in-arms be injured. It creates this damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, where if they make the decision to kill, they may prefer to be burdened with what's called blood guilt, and they may have that weighing on their conscience. However, even worse, if they choose not to kill, and their comrade gets injured or killed, they will forever be lived with the notion that if I had acted, they would still be alive. And that can totally destroy a person's psyche. The reason I bring all this up, and the reason I've been standing up here for the last 7 minutes, is because despite how horrible killing may be and how much we want to push it aside, we can't and we shouldn't. Because for many returning soldiers and veterans, killing was something that they unfortunately had to experience and may be deeply psychologically trauma. They have deep psychological trauma from it. And it is our obligation as a civilian society to welcome them back with open arms and to understand the hell that they went through. These men and women gave themselves up willingly for our country, and they've gone through hell for it. I think it's high time that we save them. Thank you.